Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Look, nobody plans to crash land on a frozen moon in the middle of nowhere. Nobody wakes up and thinks, you know what would make this rotation interesting? A catastrophic engine failure and a one-way ticket to hypothermia. But the universe has a sense of humor. A twisted, sadistic sense of humor. And Valentina was about to become the punchline. The freighter hit the surface like a meteor with commitment issues, skipping once, twice, then plowing through what might have been ice, or might have been rock, or might have been crystallized misery. Hard to tell when you're spinning like laundry in a defective dryer. Metal screamed. Alarms screamed. Valentina might have screamed too, but she was too busy wrestling with controls that had all the responsiveness of a deceased fish. When the ship finally stopped moving, there was a moment of perfect silence. Beautiful. Really. Peaceful. Then Bits chimed in. Well, that could have gone worse. Valentina unbuckled her harness with shaking hands, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. Worse? Worse how, exactly? We could have exploded. We still might explode. Optimism. I like it. Bits paused, and Valentina heard the telltale clicking that meant the AI was cycling through damaged processors. Although I should mention that my threat assessment protocols are currently, let's say, compromised. So if I tell you everything's fine, maybe assume the opposite. Fantastic. Valentina pulled herself out of the pilot's chair, wincing at the collection of bruises already forming across her ribs. The cockpit was a disaster zone, sparking wires, cracked view screens, and a smell like burning plastic mixed with ozone. Through the fractured canopy, she could see a landscape that looked like someone had flash-frozen a nightmare and then abandoned it to gather dust. Twin moons hung in a purple-black sky, casting everything in shades of blue and silver. Ice formations jutted up like teeth from the ground, and they were glowing. Actually glowing. Bioluminescence, maybe? Some kind of mineral phosphorescence? Whatever it was, it turned the frozen wasteland into something almost beautiful in a deeply unsettling way. Environmental analysis? Valentina asked, already pulling on her thermal gear. Atmospheric composition is mostly breathable. Temperature is, let's call it, brisk. Native life forms are, bits. Present. Finish the sentence. Unknown. My biological scanners are having what I can only describe as a philosophical crisis. Valentina grabbed her emergency pack, checking contents by muscle memory. Ration bars, water purification tablets, medical supplies, flare gun, thermal blankets, and a plasma cutter that was meant for salvage work, but could theoretically also cut through things that weren't supposed to be cut, like problems or predators. The cargo bay door was jammed, naturally, because why would anything be easy? It took the plasma cutter and a solid 5 minutes of creative cursing before the door surrendered and opened with a groan that sounded almost reproachful. The cold hit like a physical force. Not the kind of cold you could dress for, but the kind that made you understand on a cellular level that this environment wanted you dead. Valentina's breath crystallized instantly, and the moisture in her nose froze before she'd taken 3 steps. Temperature reading? She asked through chattering teeth. My thermometer is crying. Bits. -38 and dropping. Wind chill makes it worse. Much worse. So much worse that I'm experiencing existential dread about your continued survival. And I don't even have a survival instinct. Valentina scanned the wreckage with practiced efficiency. The ship wasn't going anywhere. One engine was completely sheared off, the other was partially embedded in the ice, and the hull had more cracks than a conspiracy theorist's manifesto. But there were salvageable pieces, insulated paneling, wiring, a bent piece of hull plating that would work as a windbreak. She started building the fire in the lee of a large ice formation, using debris from the ship and a chemical ignition stick from her emergency pack. The flames caught quickly. Too quickly, actually, burning with an odd greenish tinge that suggested the debris contained materials that probably shouldn't be inhaled. But hypothermia was a more immediate concern than long-term carcinogen exposure, so Valentina fed the fire and tried to stop shaking. That's when she saw the movement. At first, she thought it was the wind disturbing the snow. Then she thought maybe it was a thermal hallucination, her brain misfiring in the cold. Then she thought maybe she should grab the flare gun, because whatever that was, it was big, and it was moving with purpose. But it wasn't big. Not really. Not compared to what her panicking hindbrain had conjured. The creature that emerged from behind an ice ridge was about the size of a large dog, maybe a small wolf. 6 legs. That was the first thing Valentina noticed, because 6 legs meant alien biology, meant nothing in her experience applied. The second thing she noticed was the fur. Except it wasn't fur, not exactly. Crystalline structures grew from its skin in overlapping layers, refracting the firelight and the bioluminescent glow from the ice into a shifting rainbow that hurt to look at directly. The third thing she noticed was the eyes. Multiple sets, arranged in pairs along a wedge-shaped skull that was definitely designed for biting things and not letting go. The creature watched her. She watched it. The fire crackled between them. Then it moved closer. Valentina's hand drifted toward the flare gun. Slow. Casual. Don't spook the potentially deadly alien fauna. The creature, no, the cub, because those proportions were definitely juvenile, padded closer on paws that seemed too large for its body. It circled the fire once, twice, nose working overtime, analyzing her scent in ways that probably told it more than any scanner could. Then it approached her directly and clamped its teeth onto her thermal sleeve. Not biting, not attacking, just tugging, pulling at the fabric with gentle insistence, making a sound somewhere between a chirp and a growl. Valentina stared at the creature. The creature stared back, multifaceted eyes glittering with what might have been curiosity, or might have been hunger, or might have been something humans didn't have a word for. She reached down with her other hand and tugged back. Once. Firm but not aggressive. A clear statement. No. The creature released her sleeve immediately. Its ears, or whatever those crystalline fan structures were, flattened against its skull. Then it did something that made Valentina's brain short-circuit entirely. It lay down. Right there, next to the fire. Curled into a ball with all 6 legs tucked underneath, crystalline fur dimming to a soft glow. Within moments, its breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep. Valentina looked at the sleeping predator cub, looked at the fire, looked at the empty wasteland stretching in all directions. Bits? Yes, Valentina? Am I hallucinating? Doubtful. I'm seeing it too, and I'm reasonably certain I don't hallucinate. Although given my current state of damage, I can't completely rule it out. There's a baby alien predator sleeping by my fire. That does appear to be the situation, yes. Why? Well, the leading theories involve pack behavior, social hierarchy, and the possibility that you accidentally asserted dominance through what it interpreted as an appropriate challenge response. Or it thinks you're its mother. Or it's planning to eat you later and wants you to lower your guard first. Not helping, Bits. I rarely do. Valentina settled down on the other side of the fire, keeping the flames between her and the cub. She kept the flare gun within reach, kept her eyes open, kept breathing, which felt like an achievement in itself. The cub, she was already thinking of it as Flicker, because of the way its crystalline fur pulsed with inner light. Didn't move, didn't attack, just slept with the trusting abandon of something that had never learned to fear. Twin moons tracked across the alien sky. The fire burned lower. And Valentina, cargo hauler and accidental crash survivor, sat on a frozen moon in the middle of nowhere, watching a baby apex predator sleep beside her fire. She'd had worse nights. Not many, granted, but a few. The universe really did have a twisted sense of humor. Morning on a frozen moon looked exactly like night, except somehow colder and more accusatory about your life choices. The twin moons had shifted position in the sky, casting different shadows across the ice, and the bioluminescent formations had dimmed to a sullen glow. Valentina woke with her back against a piece of hull plating, her fire reduced to embers, and a six-legged predator cub sprawled across her legs like the world's most dangerous weighted blanket. She froze. Not from the cold this time, though that was still a factor, but from the sudden understanding that moving might trigger predatory instincts she really didn't want to explore. Flicker's eyes opened, all of them, simultaneously, which was deeply unnerving in ways Valentina couldn't quite articulate. They stared at each other. The moment stretched. Valentina's hand was nowhere near the flare gun, and her legs were completely pinned. And this was it. This was how she died. Mauled by an alien puppy on a moon nobody even knew existed. Then Flicker yawned. The yawn revealed teeth that belonged in a nightmare factory. Rows of crystalline fangs designed for shearing through things that probably didn't want to be sheared. The yawn also revealed a tongue that was far too long and had far too many segments. The yawn completed, Flicker stood up, stretched each leg individually in a sequence that took longer than seemed necessary, and then head-butted Valentina's shoulder with what might have been affection, or might have been a threat assessment. "Good morning to you, too," Valentina muttered, slowly reclaiming her legs and checking for frostbite. Her toes were still attached and mostly functional, which felt like a win. Bits crackled to life from the wreckage. "Vital signs detected. You survived the night. Surprising and delightful. Your confidence is overwhelming. I've run the calculations. Your continued survival odds increase significantly with the cub's presence. It hasn't eaten you yet, which suggests either affection or you're not nutritionally interesting." Valentina rebuilt the fire, while Flicker watched with the intense focus of a student taking notes. The cub mimicked her movements. When Valentina picked up a piece of debris, Flicker picked up a piece of debris. When Valentina arranged fuel around the ignition point, Flicker arranged random objects in a circle that served no purpose whatsoever. "You're helping," Valentina told the cub. "Absolutely helping." Flicker chirped, sounding pleased. The distress beacon was Valentina's primary objective. The ship's main transmitter was slag, but the emergency backup had its own power supply and might still function. She needed to access the communications bay, which meant crawling through a twisted maze of collapsed bulkheads and sparking wiring. Flicker, naturally, insisted on helping. "No, stay, sit, whatever the alien equivalent is." Valentina pointed firmly at the ground. Flicker sat, then immediately stood up and tried to follow. "Bits, I don't suppose you have any information on training alien predators? My database includes training protocols for approximately 632 Earth species, none of which have 6 legs or crystalline biostructures. I'm extrapolating wildly here, but consistency seems key. Valentina tried again, pointed at the ground, used her stern voice, the one that had worked on unruly cargo loaders and stubborn machinery. Stay. Flicker cocked its head, crystalline ears rotating independently. Then it sat, and stayed. Huh. Valentina backed toward the ship, maintaining eye contact. Flicker watched, but didn't move. Okay then. She made it halfway through the communications bay access before Flicker appeared beside her, squeezing through a gap that should have been too small. The cub looked inordinately proud of itself. "You're killing me here," Flicker chirped, and started investigating the wiring with its nose, which seemed like a terrible idea given the sparking and exposed current. Valentina gently redirected the cub toward something less immediately lethal, a bundle of insulated cables that wouldn't electrocute curious alien fauna. The distress beacon was damaged, but salvageable. Valentina worked methodically, rerouting power, bypassing fried circuits, and performing the kind of field repairs that would make proper engineers weep. Flicker observed everything, occasionally offering commentary in the form of chirps, growls, and once a sound that Valentina could only describe as mechanical screaming. "I agree," she told the cub. "This wiring is offensive." Bits interrupted with the electronic equivalent of throat clearing. "Analysis complete on your new companion. You're going to want to hear this." "Go ahead." "Flicker. And yes, I'm using your designation because I don't have anything better. Is a juvenile specimen of an apex predator species. Pack hunters. Highly social. Intelligence markers suggest problem-solving abilities on par with Earth's great apes. Possibly higher." Valentina paused in her work, looking at Flicker. The cub was currently trying to fit its entire head into a storage compartment. "That's highly intelligent?" "It's young and bored. The social structure indicators are more interesting. Pack hierarchies based on demonstrated capability rather than pure aggression. Submission displays following clear dominance assertions." Bits paused meaningfully, like, say, a firm physical correction followed by consistent behavioral boundaries. "You're saying I accidentally became pack leader by tugging its sleeve." "I'm saying you demonstrated alpha behavior through appropriate correction of subordinate action." Flicker responded exactly as a juvenile pack member should: immediate compliance and bonding behavior. Valentina sat back on her heels, processing this. Flicker extracted its head from the compartment and brought her a piece of broken plastic, dropping it at her feet like a prize. "Good job," Valentina said automatically, then felt ridiculous for praising an alien predator like a trained pet. Flicker's entire body brightened, crystalline fur pulsing with light. The beacon repair took most of the morning. When Valentina finally got it online, the signal was weak and intermittent, but it was broadcasting. Someone, somewhere, might hear it. Eventually. Her stomach reminded her that survival required more than just signaling for rescue. The emergency rations would last maybe 5 days if she was careful. Less if she had to share. Flicker solved that problem by disappearing for an hour and returning with something dead. The something was roughly rabbit-sized, covered in scales, and frozen solid. Flicker dropped it at Valentina's feet, then sat back with an expectant air. "Is this for me?" Flicker chirped affirmatively. Valentina looked at the frozen corpse, looked at the cub, looked at her dwindling ration bars. "I appreciate the thought, really, but I can't eat that raw, and I don't know if it's toxic to human biology." Flicker cocked its head, processing, then picked up the dead thing and started eating it itself, crunching through frozen scales with evident satisfaction. Valentina shared one of her ration bars with the cub. Flicker approached it suspiciously, sniffed it extensively, then consumed it in one bite and immediately began searching for more. These are survival rations. They're meant to last. Flicker gave her a look that transcended species barriers. A universal look. The look of a juvenile that has tasted something good and wants more right now immediately. No, those have to last 5 days minimum. The cub slumped dramatically, radiating disappointment. Don't you start with me? You literally just caught your own food. Flicker perked up, trotted back to its kill, and dragged the remaining half toward Valentina. Dropped it at her feet again. Sat. Waited. The offering was clear. You shared with me. I share with you. Pack behavior. Resource distribution. Valentina felt something twist in her chest. This creature, this alien predator on a moon she'd crashed on by accident, was trying to take care of her. Bits? The gesture is consistent with pack bonding behavior. Food sharing is a significant social activity for this species. Refusing might be interpreted as rejection. Valentina looked at the half-frozen alien rabbit thing, looked at Flicker's expectant face. She accepted the gift, made a show of examining it, then carefully set it near the fire. Thank you. I'll save it for later. Flicker's entire body language shifted. Satisfaction. Pride. The cub curled up near the fire, and Valentina could have sworn it was smiling. The afternoon brought excitement of a different kind. Valentina was reinforcing her shelter when Flicker suddenly went rigid. The cub's crystalline fur flattened against its body, and it made a sound like rocks grinding together. A warning. Something moved in the distance. Something big. The creature that emerged from the ice formations was nothing like Flicker. Reptilian. Bipedal. Twice Valentina's height, with a mouth full of teeth and an attitude that screamed apex predator. Its scales were matte black, absorbing light instead of reflecting it, and its eyes tracked Valentina with the focus of something that had already decided she was food. Flicker positioned itself between Valentina and the threat. The tiny cub against a big monster. The size difference was laughable, tragic. Flicker didn't seem to care. The reptilian predator made a sound like an avalanche contained in a throat. Flicker responded with that same rock-grinding growl, standing firm. Valentina's mind raced. The flare gun would work once. Maybe. The plasma cutter could do damage, but required close quarters, which seemed like suicide. Running was pointless. The thing had legs designed for pursuit. The predator took a step forward. Flicker tensed. Valentina made a decision. She grabbed the flare gun, aimed high and to the left of the creature, and fired. The flare screamed into existence with a sound like a small sun being born. It hit an ice formation and exploded in a shower of sparks and chemical fire. The ice shattered, amplifying the effect, turning one flare into a cascade of light and noise and chaos. The predator flinched, hesitated. Valentina fired again. This time she aimed directly at the creature's feet, and the flare detonated against the ice with enough force to send cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. The predator decided that prey that exploded its environment wasn't worth the effort. It retreated, moving back into the ice formations with surprising speed for something so large. Valentina stood there, flare gun smoking, heart trying to escape through her rib cage. Flicker remained in position for another long moment, then turned and pressed against Valentina's legs, seeking contact and reassurance. She knelt down, and the cub climbed into her lap, surprisingly heavy and warm despite the crystalline exterior. Valentina found herself stroking the creature's back, fingers moving automatically through the strange fur. "We're okay," she murmured. "We're okay." Flicker made a sound like wind chimes. Agreement. Trust. And Valentina understood, with absolute clarity, that she had just become responsible for this creature. Not through choice or planning, but through action and consequence. She'd protected Flicker. Flicker had tried to protect her. They were pack now, whether she'd planned it or not. Bits? Yes, Valentina? I think I just adopted an alien apex predator. Technically, I believe it adopted you. You simply accepted the arrangement by demonstrating protective pack behavior. Valentina laughed. It came out slightly unhinged, which seemed appropriate given the circumstances. She was stranded on a frozen moon, waiting for a rescue that might never come, and she'd become a parent to something that would eventually grow large enough to swallow her whole. The universe really, truly, absolutely had a twisted sense of humor. Flicker fell asleep in her arms, glowing softly in the firelight, and Valentina, cargo hauler and accidental xenobiologist, held on tight and wondered what fresh madness tomorrow would bring. Day 3 on the frozen moon dawned, or whatever passed for dawn when the sky never really changed, with Flicker acting strange. The cub had been restless since before. Valentina woke, pacing in tight circles around the camp, pausing every few moments to make sounds that started low in its chest and built to something almost musical. Not distress calls, not warnings, something else entirely. Bits, what's going on with Flicker? Analyzing vocalization patterns. One moment. The AI paused, which usually meant bad news delivered with maximum dramatic timing. Oh. I hate when you say "oh" like that. The vocalizations are a homing signal. Flicker is calling the pack. Valentina's blood went cold, which was an achievement considering the ambient temperature. The pack, as in adult versions of Flicker, as in massive apex predators. That would be the pack, yes. And they're coming here. The signal appears to be directional and persistent, so, yes, I'd estimate they're already en route. Probably have been since Flicker went missing. Valentina looked at the cub, who was now sitting on a high piece of ice, crystalline fur blazing bright as it sang to the horizon. The little traitor looked absolutely delighted about the incoming apocalypse. How long do I have? Based on estimated travel speed for creatures of that size and mass, accounting for terrain difficulty, and assuming they started searching immediately after Flicker wandered off, I'd say you're looking at anywhere from 2 hours to 10 minutes. That's not helpful, Bits. I'm working with damaged sensors and theoretical biology. If you want precision, maybe don't crash on uncharted moons. Valentina considered her options. Running was pointless. Where would she even go? The ship was barely shelter, let alone a fortress. Fighting was laughable. She had a flare gun with 3 shots left, a plasma cutter, and the kind of misplaced optimism that got people killed in survival situations. What she did have was Flicker. And Flicker, for reasons that defied logic, seemed to consider Valentina pack. So maybe, just maybe, the approaching pack wouldn't immediately tear her apart. Maybe. The optimism felt very misplaced indeed. She spent the next hour preparing. Not for combat. That was suicide. But for presentation. She built up the fire until it roared, arranged her camp to look purposeful and established, and placed herself in clear view with Flicker at her side. If the pack was going to make a judgment call about her, she wanted them to see her with their missing cub, safe and healthy. Of course, there was always the possibility they'd blame her for Flicker being missing in the first place, in which case the last thing Valentina would see would be crystalline teeth closing around her face. She really needed to work on her positive thinking. The pack appeared on the horizon at the 90-minute mark, which meant Bitz's estimate had been surprisingly accurate. 6 shapes moving across the ice with the fluid coordination of persistence hunters. Even at a distance, their size was obvious. Terrifying. Each one was easily the size of a small shuttle. All 6, legs working in perfect rhythm, crystalline fur catching the light and turning them into mobile rainbows of death. Flicker's vocalizations intensified, shifting from musical to joyful. The cub practically vibrated with excitement. Valentina fought every instinct that screamed at her to run. She stood her ground, hands visible and empty, posture relaxed despite the fact that her heart was trying to drill through her sternum. The pack approached with deliberate slowness. Not stalking, exactly. More like assessing. They fanned out in a loose semicircle, cutting off any escape route Valentina might have been stupid enough to try. The alpha was obvious. Larger than the others, with scars cutting through the crystalline fur in jagged patterns that caught light differently. One of her fan-like ears was partially torn, and her eyes, her eyes held the kind of intelligence that made Valentina understand that she was being evaluated on levels she couldn't even comprehend. Valentina had mentally named her Frost before she'd consciously decided to, because looking at that scarred face felt like watching winter given physical form. Flicker bounded forward, actually bounded, like a puppy reuniting with a parent, and immediately began the kind of submissive displays that Bitz had theorized about. The cub rolled onto its back, exposed its throat, made sounds that were pure juvenile appeasement. Frost sniffed Flicker thoroughly, checking for injuries with a delicacy that seemed impossible from something so large. The other pack members maintained their positions, watching Valentina with unblinking focus. Then Frost turned her attention to Valentina. The alpha approached slowly, each step deliberate. She was massive up close. Her shoulder was level with Valentina's chest, and her head was the size of Valentina's entire torso. Those eyes focused on Valentina with laser precision, analyzing, categorizing, deciding. Valentina's internal monologue was screaming, a constant stream of, "This is it, you're going to die on a frozen moon because you tugged a cub's sleeve? What kind of death is that for a cargo?" Holler that she ruthlessly suppressed in favor of maintaining external calm. Frost lowered her head, sniffed. Her nose, cold and slightly damp, pressed against Valentina's chest, her neck, her hands, learning her scent the way Flicker had, memorizing her. Valentina stood perfectly still, breathed slowly, didn't make eye contact, dominance challenge, but didn't look away entirely. Submission. Somewhere in between. Respectful. Acknowledging Frost's authority without rolling over. The alpha pulled back slightly, made a sound, a questioning rumble that Valentina felt in her bones. And Valentina, operating on instinct and half-understood xenobiology, responded the only way that made sense. She reached out, slowly, telegraphing the movement, and gently touched Frost's scarred muzzle. A greeting. An acknowledgement. Pack contact. Frost went very, very still. The other pack members tensed. Valentina's hand remained steady despite the fact that her brain was filing formal complaints about this entire course of action. Then Frost moved. A deliberate, powerful motion that Valentina couldn't avoid or counter. The alpha's head came forward and impacted Valentina's chest with enough force to send her stumbling backward 3 steps before she caught her balance. A headbutt. Firm, but not aggressive. The kind of contact that said, "Acknowledged." The tension broke like shattered ice. The pack converged on Flicker, a reunion full of sounds and movement and obvious affection. The cub was passed between pack members each one checking and greeting and confirming health. And Valentina, somehow still alive and conscious, found herself accepted. Not as prey, not as threat, as pack. Frost returned to Valentina's side and simply stood there, waiting. The message was clear even without shared language. Valentina, feeling like she was acting in a dream, reached up and placed her hand on Frost's shoulder. The alpha's crystalline fur was surprisingly warm, humming with internal energy. They stood like that for a long moment. Human and alien. Different species, different worlds, different everything. Connected by nothing more than a lost cub and a series of decisions that had somehow led to this impossible outcome. "Bits," Valentina murmured, quiet enough that only her calm could pick it up. "Am I hallucinating?" "If you are, it's a shared hallucination, and I'm very concerned about my programming integrity. I've been adopted by alien wolves the size of shuttles. Technically, you were already adopted by one alien wolf. Now you've been accepted by the pack. Congratulations on your new extremely dangerous family." One of the pack members, smaller than Frost, with brighter coloring, approached Valentina next, sniffed, then made a sound that was unmistakably amused before headbutting her shoulder with enough force to remind her that gentle for them was still enough to bruise human bone. Another approached, then another, each one greeting her, acknowledging her presence, accepting her into their social structure. Flicker, watching this entire process, looked smugly satisfied, like a child who'd brought home a stray and convinced the parents to let it stay. Except in this scenario, Valentina was the stray. The pack settled around her camp as if they'd always been there. Two of them immediately went to sleep, curled together in a pile of crystalline fur and contentment. One began grooming Flicker with focused intensity. Another wandered off to patrol the perimeter. Frost remained beside Valentina, a massive presence that radiated authority and unexpected warmth. "So," Valentina said to the alien alpha, "I guess we're doing this." Frost made a sound like rocks tumbling in an avalanche, which might have been agreement, or might have been amusement, or might have been a warning that Valentina had signed up for something she couldn't possibly understand. Probably all three. The next development came at sunset, or what passed for sunset, when the moon shifted and the light changed angles. The pack became active all at once, a coordinated movement that spoke of long practice and ingrained routine. Frost stood and looked at Valentina, then looked toward the ice formations in the distance, then back to Valentina. The invitation was clear. "You want me to come with you?" Frost made an affirmative rumble. One of the other pack members moved beside Valentina and lowered itself to the ground, angling its body in a way that suggested climbing aboard. "Bits, they want me to hunt with them." That appears to be the situation. Pack bonding activity, shared resource gathering. You've been invited to participate in group survival behavior. I don't know how to hunt alien fauna on a frozen moon. Well, you didn't know how to adopt an alien predator cub either, and that worked out. Mostly. Valentina looked at the waiting pack, at Frost's patient, expectant gaze, at Flicker, who was practically vibrating with excitement. She climbed onto the pack member's back. The creature's fur was warm against her legs, and its body heat soaked through her thermal gear in a way that was immediately addictive. She found handholds in the crystalline structures, and the creature stood smoothly, adjusting to her weight with barely a pause. "If I die doing this, I'm haunting you, Bits. I'll prepare appropriate memorial files." Then the pack moved, and Valentina discovered what it meant to run with apex predators. They moved like liquid across the frozen landscape, 6 legs finding purchase on ice that should have been impossible to navigate. The pack member carrying Valentina ran with smooth, powerful strides that ate distance without apparent effort. Frost led from the front, and the others fanned out in a formation that was clearly tactical. The hunt itself was a masterclass in coordination. They tracked something, Valentina never got a clear view of the prey, through the ice formations using signals she couldn't hear and communication she couldn't follow. But she could see the strategy, the way they herded the target, the way they cut off escape routes, the way they moved as a single organism despite being 6 separate bodies. Valentina's contribution was almost accidental. The prey, something large and fast with too many legs, broke from the pack's formation and headed directly toward an ice formation that would have provided escape. Valentina, acting on instinct, pulled the flare gun and fired. The flare hit the ice ahead of the creature, and the explosion sent cracks racing across the surface. The prey veered away from the sound and light, straight into Frost's waiting jaws. The kill was quick, efficient. The pack converged, and within moments, they were sharing the meal according to some hierarchy Valentina didn't fully understand. Frost dragged a portion toward Valentina and dropped it at her feet. An offering, a share of the kill. Valentina looked at the steaming meat, looked at Frost, understood that refusing would be an insult, that this was pack behavior, that she'd contributed, and therefore she got to share in the reward. She accepted the portion, made appropriate, grateful sounds, and set it aside for later processing. The pack seemed satisfied with this response. On the journey back to camp, Valentina rode on Frost's back instead. The Alpha's gait was different from the other pack member, more powerful, more confident. And when they returned to the camp, when Valentina dismounted and found her legs shaky from the experience, Frost stayed close. Protective. Approving. Pack. Flicker immediately demanded attention, showing off to Valentina about the hunt as if the human hadn't been there to see it. The cub's enthusiasm was infectious, and Valentina found herself laughing. Actual laughing. For the first time since the crash. She was stranded on a frozen moon. Her ship was destroyed. Rescue was uncertain, but she was warm. She was fed. She was surrounded by massive alien predators who, against all logic and reason, had decided she was worth keeping. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. But sometimes, just sometimes, the punchline wasn't fatal. Valentina settled in for the night with Flicker curled against one side, and Frost's massive bulk providing a windbreak on the other. The rest of the pack arranged themselves in a loose circle around the camp, and for the first time since the crash, Valentina felt something approaching safe. She was pack now, for better or worse. And somehow, despite everything, that felt exactly right. The rescue ship arrived on day 8, dropping out of orbit with all the subtlety of a meteor with an attitude problem. Valentina was in the middle of grooming Flicker, an activity she'd never imagined doing but had become routine, when Bits announced incoming vessels with the kind of alarm that suggested imminent complications. "We have company. Large freighter class, military-grade sensors, and they're scanning the area like they're expecting trouble." Valentina looked at the pack sprawled around her camp. Frost was lounging against the remains of the crashed ship like it was a convenient backrest. 3 others were sleeping in a pile. 1 was off hunting. Flicker was currently attempting to eat Valentina's boot. "Yeah," she said. "They're probably going to get the wrong idea about this." The rescue ship landed with excessive caution, keeping distance between itself and the cluster of massive predators surrounding the human-shaped heat signature. Valentina could practically feel the confusion radiating from the vessel. A voice crackled over open comms. This is Captain Ulrich of the freighter Wandering Bell. We picked up your distress beacon. Do you require assistance? The uncertainty in that question was understandable. Valentina stood up, brushed ice off her thermal gear, and activated her suit comm. This is Valentina, pilot of the crashed vessel. I'm fine. The local fauna is friendly. Silence. Long silence. Then, ma'am, our sensors indicate you're surrounded by 6 Apex-class predators and 1 juvenile. When you say friendly, I mean they adopted me. It's complicated. More silence. Valentina could imagine the conversation happening on that bridge. The debates about mental stability and cold-induced hallucinations. The cargo ramp descended with hydraulic precision, and a security team emerged wearing combat armor and carrying weapons that were probably meant to be reassuring, but mainly looked like overkill. They fanned out in textbook formation, and Valentina had to give them credit. They didn't panic when Frost stood up to her full, terrifying height. Captain Ulrich followed his security team, a man who looked like he'd been carved from wood and disappointment. He had the kind of face that had seen everything, survived most of it, and wasn't impressed by any of it. He stopped at what he probably considered a safe distance, which was optimistic given Frost could cross it in 2 bounds. "Ma'am," Ulrich said carefully, "are you being held against your will?" "No." "Are you injured?" "Bruised. Frostbitten in a few places. Nothing serious." "Are those creatures planning to eat you?" Valentina looked at Flicker, who was now chewing on a piece of debris with intense focus. "Probably not. We're pack." Ulrich's expression suggested he was recalculating his entire understanding of xenobiology. "Your pack. It's been an interesting week." One of the security team made the mistake of moving too quickly, and Frost responded with a warning growl that sounded like continental plates shifting. The entire rescue team froze. "Easy," Valentina called out. She walked over to Frost and placed her hand on the Alpha's shoulder. The growling stopped immediately. "They're here to help, not a threat." Frost made a skeptical sound but settled back down, though her eyes never left the armed strangers. "Bits," Valentina said quietly. "Status on the data compilation?" "Complete. Full behavioral observations, biological scans, environmental data, and approximately 8 days of continuous recording. It's comprehensive enough to make xenobiologists weep with joy." Ulrich approached more carefully now, and Valentina could see him processing the situation with the kind of tactical thinking that came from decades of dealing with the impossible. "Your ship's destroyed. You need medical attention. And you've apparently befriended creatures that could rip through hull plating." "That's an accurate summary, yes." "What do you want to do?" It was the right question. Not what she should do or what procedure dictated. What she wanted. Valentina looked at the pack. At Frost, who'd accepted her without question. At Flicker, who'd found her in the wreckage and decided she was worth keeping. At the others, who'd shared their kills and their warmth, and their protection. Then she looked at the rescue ship, at safety and medical care, and returned to normal life. "I want to make a deal," she said. 2 hours later, Valentina sat in the Wandering Bell's medbay, while a scanner confirmed what she already knew. Bruised ribs, minor frostbite, malnutrition, and exhaustion. Nothing that wouldn't heal. Ulrich sat across from her, reviewing a datapad with the kind of focus usually reserved for explosive ordnance. "This data is remarkable. If even half of it checks out with the science community, you're looking at significant compensation. Research grants, academic positions." "I don't want academic positions." "Then what do you want?" "This moon gets protected status. No colonization, no mining, no hunting, and I get clearance to establish a research outpost. Ulrich raised an eyebrow. You want to come back? I'm coming back. The only question is whether it's official or whether I have to do it illegally. The captain studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small, knowing expression. You know what? I've seen a lot of things in my time. Watched people bond with planets, with ships, with causes, but I've never seen someone bond with apex predators on a frozen moon in the middle of nowhere. He stood up, offered his hand. I'll file the appropriate reports. Recommend protected status. The rest is up to bureaucrats, but I'll make it compelling. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're planning to live with creatures that could kill you by accident. Bits will keep me safe. From her salvaged core in the corner, Bits chimed in. My survival calculation protocols remain deeply concerned about this plan. The goodbye was harder than Valentina expected. She stood at the bottom of the cargo ramp while the pack watched from a distance. They understood departure. Pack members left to hunt, to scout, to explore. But they also understood return. Flicker approached first, pressing against Valentina's legs with enough force to nearly knock her over. The cub made sounds that translated across species barriers as distress and confusion. I'm coming back, Valentina promised, running her hands through crystalline fur. 6 months, maybe less, I promise. Frost came next, and the alpha's goodbye was simpler. A headbutt, gentle by Frost's standards, still enough to leave a bruise, and a sound that might have been approval, or might have been warning. Probably both. The pack watched as Valentina boarded the ship, watched as the ramp closed, watched as the engines fired and the vessel lifted off, rising into the purple-black sky. And Valentina watched them grow smaller through the viewport, 6 massive predators and 1 cub standing on a frozen moon. And she made promises to herself about return and research and proper equipment. 6 months later, she kept those promises. The outpost was small but functional. Temperature-controlled habitat, research lab, supply storage, and communication array. Valentina landed with official credentials, proper funding, and bits installed in a new, undamaged chassis. The pack found her within hours of touchdown. Flicker arrived first, except Flicker wasn't small anymore. The cub had grown to nearly adult size, all long legs and developing muscle mass and crystalline fur that blazed like captured starlight. The reunion involved tackle-hugging that nearly broke bones and vocalizations that probably registered on seismic sensors. Flicker's siblings, born while Valentina was gone, tumbled over each other trying to investigate the strange human who'd returned. Frost watched it all with the patient amusement of a parent watching chaos unfold according to plan. Valentina knelt in the snow, surrounded by apex predators, and felt something settle in her chest. This was home now, not the outpost, not the ship, not some distant planet she'd left behind. Here, with this pack on this frozen moon. Bits? She said, laughing as one of the new cubs tried to eat her equipment case. Yes, Valentina? I think we made the right choice. Statistically improbable, emotionally satisfying. Survival odds remain concerning, but improving. Bits paused. Welcome home. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. It had crashed her ship, stranded her on a frozen wasteland, and introduced her to creatures that should have killed her. Instead, it had given her a family. And Valentina, cargo hauler turned xenobiologist turned pack member, looked at Frost and Flicker and the others, and decided that maybe, just maybe, the universe's sense of humor wasn't so twisted after all. Sometimes the punchline was actually perfect.